Morning, everybody. I just wanted to tell you, or I just wanted to acknowledge that it's 9/11, and at least 15 minutes or 45 minutes ago, I was literally working in a quarry, and we stopped the quarry because things were really happening. So it's a pretty solemn day for a lot of people, but we're happy to be here, and we're celebrating a new venture um, with Austin Unruh and getting trees, regenerify the country here, and get on a stronger footing. This is the first Watershed Wednesday series, first week. I'm Troy Bishop, the grazing specialist for Madison County Soil and Water and the Upper Susquehanna Coalition. Watershed Wednesdays are hosted by the USC and the Otsego County Conservation Association. We're going to be holding these every week or every Wednesday through November 20th. The schedule, if you want to see it, is posted on our website and Facebook page. You can also sign up for email announcements on the USC website under the Watershed Wednesdays tab. The sessions are going to all be recorded, so you can access that usually on our YouTube channel or on our website or the Otsego County Conservation Association's website. I'm pleased to introduce Austin Unruh. He's the CEO from Trees for Graziers. It's a Pennsylvania company he founded to put silvopasture systems on farmland. That's just one of the things that he does. I've seen his passion and his work in the field. That's how I met him, with his 6-foot tree tubes. That was pretty interesting, and his fencing to keep livestock from eating his trees. He's got some kind of superpower for getting implementation on the ground. I don't know if he's very polite or he's got a large stick. I'm not really sure. But I thought it'd be a great start to get him to talk about his journey a little bit. Him and I have developed a few questions that we're going to run off of, so you're not going to see a PowerPoint. Yay! So this is going to be more of a conversation. If you got a question, put it in the chat box. We'll be kind of looking at that. So if you like to start us off, Austin, by telling us about your company and the scope of work that you do, and then we'll jump into the questions.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Troy, for having me.
Thank you.
I run Trees for Graziers, and we focus on silvopasture. That's kind of our core agroforestry focus. We do other agroforestry practices as well. I actually got my start in riparian buffers. So we are located in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. That's the southeastern part of the state. We're about an hour west of Philadelphia. And for those who know the agriculture in our region, it's a big dairy area. So a lot of Amish and Mennonite dairies in particular, very small farms. We probably average anywhere from 40 acres to 150 acres for most of our clients. I got my start in riparian buffers because there was a need for contractors to be focused on riparian buffers and especially on the maintenance of buffers in our region. We have a lot of really good organizations like the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Stroudwater Research are working on getting more buffers on the ground. But then there was a need for a contractor to focus on the maintenance of those buffers. And so that's how I got started. That's 7 years ago now. And 4 years ago is when we started our first silvopasture plantings. And quickly that became, we realized that was something that we could grow because there was already a lot of people working on buffers, but nobody working on silvopasture. So we decided to focus most of our attention on silvopasture, and we've had really good success with signing up a lot of farms for that. In the last 4 years, we have worked with 45 farms to do the planning, the planting, the care post planting of these silvopasture systems. We have our own tree nursery now, And then we also help people find the funding that is needed to reduce the cost of investing in these trees. So that's in a nutshell what we do.
Awesome. Is there any trends that you're seeing that, or you have started to break away from the crowd? Your name is becoming, your company's getting out there. What are the trends that you're seeing from the landowners, farmers? What are they really excited about?
So um, I'll preface it by saying we've only been in this for 4 years, and in the scope of trees, like that's not a super long time. What brings most farmers to us is they want shade. They want shade for their livestock. Most of our clients are organic dairies, and we have some beef farms as well. And just by nature of where we're located, most of the farms in our area are dairy. And the more time that livestock spend out on pasture, the more valuable that shade is. So an organic dairy that's still feeding a lot of feed and they're coming into the barn regularly, that has a significant need for silvopasture, but an all grass based dairy needs shade even more. And it needs because livestock are spending that much more time out in pasture. So I don't know if I can say we're seeing certain trends, but the demand for silvopasture really does start with shade, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we've been pushing because it's such a young industry. I can't even hardly call it an industry, but it's such a young field. And so there's a lot of improvements to be made in these early days because there's just a lot of catching up to do. So a lot of what we see as upsides that are to be realized in the coming years has to do with better genetics, better tree genetics. So the main trees that we work with some fast growing shade trees like black locust, hybrid poplars, hybrid willows. Those are kind of ready to go. Those are simple to work with. They're fast growing. The genetics are already there for just providing shade. But then for our longer term trees, we're working with a lot of honey locusts, mulberries, and persimmons are kind of the three trees that we're investing the most time and effort into. And for those, it's important to figure out clonal propagation because those trees, they'll have male and female on different trees, and only the females are going to yield fruits or pods. And so if we have a whole bunch of seedlings out there, then half of the trees aren't going to be doing anything for us other than providing some shade. So being able to clonally propagate, especially honey locust, when we're talking about silvopasture for ruminants, honey locust really stands out from the crowd as the tree with the highest upside. But we want to have all female trees, all thornless trees, high yielding trees, and in the first couple of years, we were planting little tiny seedlings from improved cultivars, because that's what we had access to. My goal is in the next couple of years that we're able to plant out 6 foot tall, nice, big, sturdy trees that are completely clonally propagated. We know that all of them are female, all of them are thornless, and all of them will be high yielding. So that's the kind of progress that we're going to be able to make in the next couple of years. And I think with that, with better nursery stock, that will make a real significant difference in how we do our plantings. If we'll probably plant fewer trees out in the pasture if we're able to plant larger trees, because we don't have to wait quite as long for those larger trees to yield us shade. So our planting density will probably go down a bit. We'll probably use less of the fast growing shade trees that are really just there to provide shade for the first couple of years while we wait for those slower growing trees to get established.
Can you, is there a crossover into riparian buffers? So, I mean, you're talking about putting these trees, wouldn't it be sort of the same for the riparian areas? You talked about fodder crops, shade, similar species. Is it one and the same, or how are you, are you bleeding over into the riparian zones too?
We tend to keep them fairly separate. So the way that I got started in riparian buffers. And the goal of the company originally, when I got started, was to make riparian buffers more attractive and more accessible to more farmers. And my goal was to use multifunctional buffers and income producing and tree crop producing buffers to create a more attractive buffer to landowners and get more landowners on board with planting riparian buffers. Um, the trouble that I found was it's not really all that practical or economical to plant, let's say, an elderberry orchard, an elderberry planting in a buffer. If you're going to go after a high value crop like that, you might as well just take prime cropland, and that's easier to access. It's not wet. It doesn't have a stream going right through the middle, and use that. And that's going to be more economical for you anyway than doing this in a riparian buffer. I have intentions of developing these practical or multifunctional riparian buffers all over the place, and then I go manage them as a contractor or as a custom harvester. But that gets really hard when you have a little plot here, a little plot there, a couple acres there. Again, it's more economical just to take some cropland and put elderberries and persimmons and pawpaws in there. So, when I realized when we started to work with a couple of clients who were they were grass-based dairies, and they asked, and we were working with them on riparian buffers, and they said, "This is great what you're doing over here in this narrow strip on my farm to get a riparian buffer established, but there's this whole large portion of my farm that could use some shade trees. So how do we get shade trees established over here?" And that really was the genesis of our work in silvopasture, when we realized that it the silvopasture just fits very neatly into a farm operation, whereas a riparian buffer in many ways is taking land out of production. And many farmers consider that once it's in a riparian buffer, that's kind of like the government's thing, or it's the conservation district's thing. It's not really my thing anymore. I don't really have as much input or insight into that area. But a silvopasture on a pasture-based livestock operation, it just fits so well into the livestock operation. Farmers know, they recognize how that is adding benefit to their system. And so it becomes much easier to sell to a farmer because they know viscerally that this is going to help them, it's going to help their livestock. So in many ways, those two, we keep them separate. We still do a lot of our own riparian buffers. We do a lot of plantings, but typically we're not planting grazed buffers here in Lancaster County. There's not much openness to grazed buffers from conservation groups. So for the most part, it's just strict conservation buffers. There's no livestock that go into those, and so we're planting, really focusing on native species that are going to grow fast and or provide a lot of conservation benefit, like your oaks and hickories and that kind of thing.
So, I know you went on and had a good field day. That's why we kind of talked. I'm kind of interested in, so what are the farmers telling you their concerns about planting trees, establishing buffers, taking land out of production? Give me a couple of opinions, I guess they would be. Like, what are you seeing that they're worried about? And then how do you think we can overcome
Hmm.
some of those barriers?
Well, I'll talk to the silvopasture in particular, because the beauty of the silvopasture systems is that we're not taking any land out of production. I guess you could get picky and say that we're taking about this much space out of production. It's less than, I guess when you include the mulch, it's about the size of a dinner plate. That's how much land we're taking out of production for every tree. So it's really completely inconsequential, the amount of land that we're taking out. And we're able to, like, the minute that we finish our planting and we have the trees secured with electric fencing, livestock are able to come right back in and graze. So there's no downtime in these systems with a solid protection system set up for the trees. There's no downtime where farmers are not able to get production off of this acreage. So that makes it a really easy sell, as it were. There's no downside, really, is what it comes down to for the farmer to do a silvopasture system
But
like
couldn't
this.
you, but couldn't you say the same thing about a riparian area? If you took the same context, as the little circle, because
Hmm.
that's really what we're doing. You just said that it's a government land grab. But what if they're willing to work with you on the silvopasture, why wouldn't they just work with you to extend it over into the riparian area?
In our area, people are not grazing the buffers. So the silvopasture area, they're able to continue to graze, they're able to continue to keep that in production. And then the riparian area, they're not allowed to graze. So it's a
So
pretty distinct
that's a
difference.
regulatory thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Are they able to graze in the riparian zones in your area, like flash graze?
Well, it depends on the project.
Hmm.
If it's a CRP contract, no. Depending again, depending.
Hmm.
I'm quite interested in the behavioral context of farmers like
Hmm.
myself and you. Why couldn't we just again just do it and not worry about the government programs and projects? Why don't we just do it because it seems like a good thing to do?
Hmm.
Is kind of where um I've always asked. If it's good enough for the pasture, why not? Don't worry about it. Just and then you have more flexibility in those areas instead of a hard fence.
Hmm. Yeah, and it costs less to maintain.
Right.
Um, and I'm all for a thoughtful producer doing a good flash grazing, right? But I think the what we all run into is the bad actors who they turn a flash graze into, look, that's another paddock for me to keep my livestock in permanently. And that's the pushback that we've gotten from conservation groups, which I understand. It's easier to have a black and white rule around whether to graze or not.
Which I would love to. I'm gonna end my career trying to figure out, it's just about management.
Hmm.
It wouldn't be the same. You'd want the same for your silvopasture trees.
Hmm.
Um, I just I tend to go after the riparian area with, well, I can put a piece of polywire up and keep the cows out, and then I could strategically graze that area without even touching the stream. So there's a lot of dynamics there between what the agencies want and what we can trust the landowner and farmer to do. So
Yeah.
I think we always talk about that. Um, so what about the maintenance? Because we're on the ground, most of us doing planting the trees, doing the maintenance. Who's doing it? What are the struggles that you're seeing to get these established? Can you talk about the 6 foot tree tubes instead of the
Mhm.
4 and 5s? Like
Mhm.
how are you getting your trees so robust? Like,
So in our silvopasture systems, the protection method that we use is based around a 6 foot tall Plantra tree shelter is the brand that we use. It's a 6 foot tall plastic tube, people are familiar with, and then it has a fiberglass stake that goes along with it. And the beauty of that is that those are completely electrical insulators, the plastic and the fiberglass, so they're not going to conduct electricity. So we're able to string electric fencing along those. And you can either string electric fencing right at let's say knee height, and then use that as a paddock division. Or you can punch a hole in the top of the tube and run the poly wire at 6 feet, so at the very top of the tube, so that livestock are able to freely move underneath that poly wire and between the rows of trees. And that allows for a lot of flexibility in how that paddock is managed, and how paddocks are made from within that tree planting. And then what you would do, you would run that poly wire at 6 foot, and then you would run an aluminum wire and spiral that around the tree tube so that livestock are not able to rub up on the tree tube. And that does a really good job of protecting those tree shelters. So that's the basic system that we have, and then we put a large dose of wood chips and a wood chip mulch around the base of every tree once we plant it. So we're usually aiming for about 10 gallons of wood chips around the base of every tree, and that's to conserve moisture, reduce weed competition, and create a more fungal environment right there at the base of the tree. And that really is the best watering that we can do is if there's water in the soil, we want to trap that water in there and conserve that water as much as possible. And then our maintenance, whenever we can, we build into a grant that we are going to have one of our crew go out twice a year for the first 4 years to provide maintenance for these trees. And we build that budget into the grant from the very get-go because we know that most farmers don't have the time and energy to devote to maintenance. And maybe it's less of a factor of they don't have the time as it never gets to the top of the priority list. Going and checking in on the trees never gets to the top of the priority list when there's a whole bunch of other things that always need to be done on a farm, and a lot of them should have been done years ago, right? So we make sure that it's someone's job on our team to go out and check in on those trees. We're weeding inside of the tree tube. We're doing any corrective prunings. We're working on the tree shelter so that it's not rubbing on the tree as it's coming out of the tube. We're removing the tube and the stake at the right times. All those things. None of it's rocket science. None of it's all that difficult. But it does need like that maintenance does need to happen, and it needs to happen in a timely fashion.
Do you I know it's just a ballpark. Do you have like a ballpark per tree tube slash spiral wood chip cost? Just
So
as a general rule.
very ballpark number. Let's talk about $60 per tree, and that's everything. That is the tree itself. That's the tree tube. That is the labor to install it. That's the labor to take care of that tree for the first 4 years. The polywire, the setting up of the polywire, the flagging, everything. So that's a good budget to work with is $60 per tree.
Um, and what does the farmer like on? I know I got down here at the bottom here. We talked about cost. We were talking about cost share rates, program dollars. What is typically asked of the landowner? You said, well, they're not going to take care of them, but I mean, we are you expecting some maintenance or some, hey, pick up the phone if something happens? What are you expecting from the landowner?
So we can't be there all the time, right? So, and we're sending one of our staff out twice a year, and we'll take care of most of the maintenance that needs to happen. But if something happens between then, like that's the landowner's responsibility to make sure that those trees are protected. If something happened to the polywire and livestock are liable to damage the trees, make sure that that's protected before you let livestock back into that paddock, right? So landowners are definitely interacting with these and making small changes over time. And on the front end, in terms of funding, one of the key reasons that we've been able to have as much success as we've had is that we've been able to find for most of our projects 100% funding. In some cases, it's been 90% or 80%, but in many cases, we've been able to find 100% cost share so the farmer doesn't have to pay anything out of pocket. And it makes it a lot easier to get someone to say yes to Silvopasture. If they're not taking any land out of production, they're not having to put a lot of time into it, and it's not costing them anything. That's a pretty easy sell. And then it just requires us to spend a lot of time going after funding. And it oftentimes requires a farmer to be patient while we apply for grants. We have a couple clients who are waiting for 3 years. We had a plan ready to go, and we kept applying for grants, and we didn't get the grants. And now finally, it looks like we'll be able to put those systems in. But it's been a good waiting process.
Well, we're coming up on our time frame. Does anybody have a question while we get towards the end here? We got 4 or 5 minutes. You can write it in the chat or um, so again, this bleed over from what you do into the riparian area to me is a fascinating thing. Um, Natalie's got a question. I see she came on. Help me.
No, no, I know. No, I don't have a question. I just
Okay.
turned I'm sorry. It's
Okay.
very interesting about the different shade trees, the short-term shade trees. Can you list those four again?
Yeah, so for trees that we use for short-term, quick growing shade is black locust, hybrid poplar, and hybrid willow. And my understanding is that black locust, you're not supposed to plant black locust in New York State. So just keep that in mind. It's a good tree. It grows well, it fixes nitrogen, great for pollinators, great for honeybees. So those are the three that we use mostly for quick growing shade trees. And then if you wanted to have other trees that are native and are going to provide those benefits, then you would look at like tulip poplar is one that I would like to use more. Sycamore is another one that you can live stake. Oh, I should also note that our hybrid poplars and hybrid willows, mostly we're planting those with tall live stakes. So we're talking a 10-foot tall live stake, so a dormant cutting, and they're about the size of my wrist. So they're good sized poles we're putting in the ground, and we put them 2 feet in the ground, and they stick 8 foot out of the ground. So it's as instant of a gratification, instant tree as you can get in agroforestry. You can do the same thing with sycamores, and I'll note this, that one thing that the bleed over that you talked about from silvopasture into riparian buffers is we're working a lot to get tall live stakes for riparian buffers. So we already have that for willows. We're going into riparian zones and planting like 8 foot tall willow live stakes, and we're putting them a foot in the ground, and that means that they're already above browse height for deer. They're able to outcompete reed canary grass, and with our taller live stakes in particular, we're looking at them for outcompeting Phragmites, which is a real problem in our area. So we're working with Stroudwater Research to test a number of these methods of getting tall live stakes in, but that's something that we pushed for in silvopasture. We had really good success with that, and now we're applying that more and more to riparian buffers because you can get quicker results, and it actually, because of the cost of the materials, you can do it cheaper than a normal tree tube plus like a containerized seedling. You can probably be as cheap or cheaper than a tree tube with a bare root seedling with the labor. And you can do that with willows. You can do it with sycamore, cottonwood, any of the true poplars. River birch is another one that we're going to look into. So that's something that we're looking to develop much more on the riparian side. And it also really lends itself towards like volunteers, or towards like if a conservation district had a 2 acre plot, you can pull a lot of live stakes off of that.
I'm really glad you brought that up because that was one of the main. You're getting instant trees with these live stakes, and you helped me on my farm a little bit. I'm trying them. Some made it, some didn't. I feel like that's a good, that would be a great thing for you to come on up here and help us do some pilot projects with these, because I hadn't seen them before I went to Brett Chedzoy's place and you were demonstrating that. And then you talked about all these other species that will do that. I think that's a great segue to get you up here and lead us into tree planting and things. So we're gonna have to wrap it up. We got one question I'll take from our award-winning conservationist Danielle. She was asking what was the planting density? What are the planting densities that you are looking at?
Yeah, for our silvopasture plantings, we're usually in the realm of 20 to 60 trees per acre. So often, and we want to think about having trees that are fairly evenly spread out so that our shade can be fairly evenly spread out. And so we're not concentrating livestock in any one place, and livestock have access to shade in whatever paddock they are. So the more even we can spread our shade, the better. But we also want to be thoughtful about farm machinery and farm access. So we're usually working in lanes of at least 40 feet between trees, sometimes 60 feet. We try not to go much further than that. If you had, let's say, 100 feet between trees, then you start to have a lot of open space in the middle, and livestock will then congregate underneath those rows. So 40 to 60 feet is common for our between row spacing, and then anywhere from 15 to 30 feet in between trees in the row is common for us.
Awesome. So, well, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Austin has a website. He has a book. If you go to his website, he's doing what's the date on your next training? There's a 3-day training.
So we have a 3-day training for professionals in particular on how to get silvopasture rolling in their area, and the dates for that are November 13th through the 15th, and it's down in this area in southeastern Pennsylvania.
So I would highly recommend some go and bring us back the good news, or we'll hire Austin to come up here. I know a lot of farms we could have you give us training up here in our context a little bit. So I hope you all have a great grazing day, or a silvopasture grazing day. It's going to be a beautiful week, and we really appreciate you coming on, Austin. And thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and before we sign off, I just wanted to share next week's Watershed Wednesdays is Head Over Heels for Eels. We're going to have Joanna Hripto from SRBC share with us about this amazing program they've been working on in Pennsylvania, and we're hoping to bring it up into New York. So we'll see you hopefully at 9:30 next week. Same link.
Great.
Thanks, Austin. That was awesome. And Troy too.
Good. Yeah, and if
Thanks,
you're interested
guys.
in like sending people down, there's already 3 or 4 folks that came down from New York to take our course. That was last year, and we're very happy to either like schedule a time for us to come up and do a training and get a whole bunch of folks from New York State in on silvopasture design principles and just protection methods and that kind of thing. So either one, if you want to send a whole bunch of people down or we come up, this upcoming course is pretty packed already. We have folks coming from PASA, we have folks coming from Virginia Tech. But I'd be very, very interested in scheduling something where we would come up and work with a conservation district or multiple conservation districts or whatever that looked like and do a training. Maybe it's Cornell.
Great.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about it.
Great.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, we'll see you guys.
See ya.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
Bye.